please support this channel by clicking on the links below. Afrocentricity by Molefi, Asante. Dubois. W.E.B. Dubois stands at the helm of intellectual and political advancement in the contemporary world. He is at once brilliant, powerful, and humanistic. At no time in the present era, and rarely in previous epochs, has any one individual so completely dominated the intellectual landscape on matters political, social, and historical. Every treatise on urban life is incomplete without reference to Dubois, and no successful scholarly study of the economic, legal, or historical implications of slavery can be achieved without homage to Dubois. In sociology, history, and political science, he laid the basis for contemporary analyses. Of the 2,377 articles and books in his bibliography, clearly the majority were on African and African American issues, although he covered almost every conceivable topic. Du Bois had a mind so agile that it could capture the essential elements of Washingtonianism and dispense with its non-essential ones. It could accept a Marxist interpretation of history and extend that interpretation to include racism, and could read Goethe while extolling the genius of the bards who created the spirituals. Despite his intense love for African people, Du Bois was not Afrocentric. He studied African people not from an African perspective, but from a European one which employed Eurocentric methods to analyze and study black people. Few African scholars of his era, if any, could break out of the tightness of European thought. Indeed, only Afrocentric scholars have been able to achieve that victory. Although he demonstrated admirably that the African could excel at European scholarship, this apologetic posture was necessary in his mind to establish our respectability worldwide. Educated at the University of Berlin and at Harvard, the citadel of Western images in America, Du Bois was steeped in the traditions of European scholarship. Despite this, his soul argued with the restrictions of Europe and frequently broke from its bonds, as is evident in such poems as I Am the Smoke King, and other plaintive lamentations for a people too long asleep. Du Bois prepared the world for Afrocentricity, the protector of an idea who did not fully recognize its power, but who would have shouted to see it come. Afrocentricity was the most logical end of his own brilliant growth pattern. The soul of his age, standing astride intellectual history, he placed one foot in Europe and the other in Africa to balance his soul and mind. Du Bois' unyielding mission was the humanizing of the world through the humanizing of America. It was a difficult, if not impossible, task. America's ethical principles were ensnarled in competitiveness. The thrust for humanity based upon culture and spiritual values was anathema to profit and competition. In this respect, Du Bois' mission was based on false assumptions about the perfectibility of competitive profiteers who saw progress only in conflict and confrontation. His high calling as an eyewitness to human history played out on the stage of life involved him in the most intractable of social schemes, that is, the integration of the American society. While discrimination could be minimized, redundant, and controlled, integration could hardly be dictated or programmed. Always the seer, Du Bois advanced integration as the key to human progress in America. Working from a Eurocentric vision, he participated in the philosophical currents of Western Europe and therefore reflected the same mental flow as Darwinism, Marxism, and Freudianism. These rather materialistic approaches to life viewed conflict as the driving force behind progress. All relationships were reducible to the elements of biology, economics, or sex. Du Bois wrestled with the contradictions of this Eurocentric view, but unable to disengage himself, he recognized in his most centered Africanness that it never fully satisfied his spiritual yearning. Nevertheless, captured by the thought of human perfectibility through rationalism, he envisioned integration as the ultimate solution to America's racial issues. Progress could be achieved if the legal conditions for such integration were encouraged. The creation of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, helped to focus on the legal struggles of African Americans. Du Bois's dream was to fight discrimination on demonstrative and legal grounds in the streets and in the courts. The integration of all social services and agencies were strongly agitated for in the South as well as in the North. The push for equality motivated Du Bois and became his motto. In every sector of American society, he fought against discrimination and for integration, believing full integration to be the only hope for internal peace. Despite his efforts, Du Bois became disillusioned. America lacked the moral character to fully integrate Africans into its democratic, capitalist government system. But discrimination would only be eliminated with the most violent opposition because all government sectors operated negatively toward integration. A new consciousness eased itself into this great man as he became more Afrocentric, though he never fully sensed his nearness to victory. Like Wallace Johnson and Nnamdi Azikiwe, Du Bois became more and more African in his outlook. Transcending his American predicament through sheer intellectual courage, he lifted himself to a higher plane. He rejected the inherent racism in capitalism and pursued socialist thought. He moved toward the rejection of materialism, which was deeply embedded in Marxist thought. Because Du Bois was beyond the limitations of a Eurocentric analysis, he could never be restricted by Marxist thought. He rallied against the small minds who categorized labor. He believed that his scholarly achievements constituted an indivisible part of work. In so doing, he acknowledged an African concept of the interconnectedness of all things. Contemporary Marxists misunderstood the nature of racism and contend that the only labor is manual labor, and therefore the only real worker is the manual laborer who creates economic value. Thus, I have been told by some misguided brothers that the inventor, theoretician, discoverer, and manager are not workers but economic parasites. Yet, from an Afrocentric perspective, manual labor functions as the value-creating prerequisite for the labor of thinkers and organizers. Whatever importance is attached to a strike by manual laborers must be seen in the light of objectives. Marxists believe that a manual laborer strike can stop any enterprise, and it is therefore more important than other forms of labor. However, a rabbit caught in the proper machinery or birds in the right places can also shut down enterprises. We must aspire to more than shutting down. We must create, manufacture, and invent. Ours must be a world where we use all of our capabilities and our labor for the enhancement of people. Only in traditional Western societies are there conflicts between classes. Such is not the case when we operate from our traditional base of harmony. In the future, a committed Afrocentric viewpoint will be used to demonstrate the viability of harmony and the inoperative nature of conflict for true human advancement. Du Bois saw in our history the unfounding desire for unity, wholeness, and harmony.